My name is Heather Torres, and I'm the Director of Graduate Programs here at Full Sail University. And we're here with a group of really great grads to talk about leadership. Excuse me as I mumble over myself today, if I can get the words out. With us today, we have Stan Miller, who is a Media Communications Bachelor of Science grad. He is also the founder of Storicate. We have Hamad Abdulla, which he's a film production master's grad, and he is actually joining us from Bahrain, and he is a film director. And we have Michael Florio, who is a creative writing MFA grad, and he's joining us from Biloxi, Mississippi, and he is the editor-in-chief of Ink Studios. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're here to talk about leadership. But before we get into that topic, I would love for you guys to share a little bit about your background and your experience. And Stan, if you could start us off and tell us about your journey and kind of what your experience has been up until this point.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd be happy to. Thank you for allowing me to share first. Sort of add some pressure to the situation here. So I like to talk about my career in really 3 chapters. The first chapter is about 12 years long. And I worked for a major telecom company. And throughout that 12 years, I did 7 different jobs and felt 46 or 56 different emotions during that journey. So working for a large company in a career can be taxing. I've had the great highs of being a top performer and the lows of halfway through that experience having to be severanced from the company and actually coming back. So I've experienced so much in my career. When I get to the end of chapter 1 in my telecom experience, I really started feeling complacent. I was a leader at the company. I wasn't sure that it was the right thing for me to do. And I started looking myself in the mirror and I started saying to myself, do you want to die as the phone guy? And the answer was no. And so I started chapter 2. I took a risk. And I went from, I did about the most risky thing I could think to do, which was to leave big corporate America and join a startup. And so that was fun because I was in a new creative space. Startups are quite creative. If you've ever worked at one, you'll know that there are lots of ups and downs. We were always raising money. We were always looking to develop new products and services. So there was a lot of creativity in that. And this is where I sort of recognized my creative juices and energies. I was a leader at this company. I started as a manager and moved my way up to a C-level executive. About halfway through my journey at the startup, I got an opportunity to come to Full Sail. And it was great because it was timely for me. I had only had a high school education. And so this was my first college experience. I did it online and I was managing a large team at the startup while I was doing this. And so throughout my career, I loved coaching, mentoring, and developing leaders and other people. And I was a mentee as well, so I enjoyed the mentorship. And one thing that I realized was throughout my career, people really struggle with communicating their value, communicating who they are at work. And this was hindering people in a lot of different ways. It was preventing them from getting interviews. And so when I joined Full Sail, one of my first courses was about storytelling. And so the bright light bulb went off, and I decided to use my education to create a company that was a storytelling company, not for big companies or marketing agencies, but for people. Mm-hmm. And so I formed Storicate here at Full Sail, and I'm proud to say chapter 3 started for me about 15 months ago, where I left my big fancy title, corporate job, and started to do my own thing, turned that side gig into a main gig. And so now I teach people the art and science of storytelling. And I do that for mid-career professionals and executives and help them find the clarity they need in their communication. And so thanks, Heather, for having me.
Yeah, well, and Stan is in the studio with me today, and it's so great to have him here. And when I found out about his story, I was so inspired because it's never too late to try something new. And I believe that he has found several different chapters that have brought him into a new space. And I just love knowing that the company that you're currently working with, that you created while you were a student here at Full Sail. So that is like very impressive to me. So I love it.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Hamad, you are our film director that's joined us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and kind of what your experience has been throughout your career?
Of course. And first of all, thank you for having me with you guys. And yeah, I started, I mean, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I did not know how I would got there. The thing was, I took my bachelor degree in fine arts and computer graphics. I think that was the closest option I had when I was going to college. I was lucky to direct a feature film in my bachelor degree, and that was when I knew, like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. And I did get the opportunity to to come to Full Sail like a few years after and take my master's in film production, and that's how it all started, I guess. I moved to California, Los Angeles, when I graduated. Worked there with different production companies, worked as a freelancer, as a film director. I worked as a production designer, art director, and I stayed there for almost a year. I went back home to Bahrain, where I'm living right now, and I've been working as a project manager. And at the same time, I do direct short films, TV shows, music videos, and I also work in the art department as a filmmaker. Um, the achievements, I guess, I received through my career were like more of like I got the chance to direct a full show for His Majesty the King here in Bahrain. I did a lot of like theatrical shows, film shows for like the royal family here in the country. At the same time, I got the opportunity to send my movies to film festivals, win different awards for best film, best director, best. So I do have a number of movies with me. I've worked with different crews in the States, in Bahrain, from different countries, which is amazing.
Yeah, I just love that. You've had such amazing opportunities in your home country. One of your teachers that recommended you for this panel, she told me that you had some opportunities out in LA that you could have pursued, but instead you chose to go home. And it sounds like you made the right choice, that you're working on some really incredible things that, maybe you would have had those opportunities in LA, but maybe not, right? So it's really great
Yeah,
that you've been able to really excel and find great things to do in Bahrain. So congratulations.
yeah.
That's great.
Thank you so
My,
much.
Michael, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on this panel. It's awesome. I appreciate it so much. I'm very humbled to be here. So I started in retail right after high school, like Stan, and I didn't want to go the college route. I had so many friends who went to the military and who went straight into college and then had trouble finding jobs afterwards. So I decided just to go straight into the workforce and climb the ladder, and I did all the way up to merchandise supervisor with Walmart. That cataclysmically came to an end. For that word. And I moved out of the state not long to Louisiana. I worked a lot of odd and end jobs. Um, I worked for an escort company moving mobile homes. And the last big job that I did before I moved back to Mississippi was a plastic operator for a giant plastic plant out in Denham Springs, Louisiana. But during those different jobs, I faced a reality. I have several children, four actually. I'm a father, and what is important to me, especially from my Italian background, is legacy. And I started to do a lot of deep introspection into who I was and what type of life that I was leaving behind as a child from a broken home. Growing up, I always had two parents, right? But I always had just the one biological at one point. And at one point I didn't have any. So I started looking at how I could make a difference in my children's lives. And I had an interesting phone call with a full cell rep who asked me the question, even if it costs a lot of money, what kind of future would you have for your child? And if all you had to do was say yes and do the work, would you want that for them or not? And so I took the plunge. I originally started in game design because I wanted to make video games. Why not do something you really love, right? And I obviously did a lot of that for 25 years. So why not? The problem with that was that you weren't going to be the person telling the stories. So after the passing of my grandma, I decided to make another decision, which was jump into the bachelor's for creative writing for entertainment, because I wanted the freedom to express myself in such a written way that I can have full control. And that's the difference between published and independent publishers, that you have a lot of that control. I went on to graduate with the Master's of Creative Writing for Entertainment in 2020, and I was approached by an individual who owned Limitless Comics, and his work I'd been a fan of his work for quite some time, and he approached me to edit a comic, which I did. And the first one was titled Thirst. After that, I had started a podcast and gone into elements of marketing that I quite didn't understand. The podcast is still very much alive today. It's changed. It's undergone a rebranding. So I've had to learn all that stuff along the way, along with like branding and graphic design and how to present yourself in such a way. That got the attention while I was shopping around for marketing my own comic, which comes out later this summer. I found a marketing company, and I did something that's frowned upon in the industry. I received marketing information, and I was looking over it, and my editor eye could not be moved to say something about their material. And I was like, can I give you an edited copy of what I'm reading? And that actually led me to a job offer. And I was offered a job with Inked Studios as kind of a copy editor at first, and then it went into social media. So I do a lot of their social media stuff too. And so not long after that, I was offered editor-in-chief. So now I do all the internal stuff, and I work on campaigns. So what I do right now is I'm editor-in-chief of Inked Studios, and we go in for creators, regardless of whether it's video games or comics, mostly comics. We've done a few films and a few tabletop games, and we go in and we help set the structure and the audience control, and we share out for individual creators to succeed on crowdfunding platforms. I'm currently still editing and writing comics as we speak. I'm also the member of the Writers Guild here in Mississippi, which has been a huge thing for me because unlike Hamad, I did not want to move to LA or New York to pursue what could be really great opportunities in comics and film, because I have a family here at home, which made me choose to dedicate all of my creative time and effort off and on the clock to find a way to bring industry to me, which is something that I'm proud to share with all of you today, and also for my children for the future.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you have something that your children that inspired you, right, to make a move. And it now seems like you've hit the ground running and you're operating in so many different spaces and passionate about what you do. So I'm so happy that you found your niche.
Very much. Thank you.
So I want to start by telling our audience, because I know we have some people that are joining us online today. We will be asking some questions at the end from our panelists, so I encourage you guys to be as involved as you can in our conversation today. But this panel today is all about leadership. And so often we have Full Sail students that come here to pursue creative endeavors, or, they're going to school for film or recording arts or music production, or they might want to be visual artists. I mean, we have over 40 different degree programs, so I won't list all of them. But there's a lot of creatives that come to Full Sail. And so often they think that they might just want to work in an isolated space. I'm also a visual artist, and sometimes I'm working alone a lot. And it might be difficult for creatives to really see how they can also be leaders within the teams that they're working on, out within their industries. Like, Michael, you had just mentioned that you're also involved in some clubs and helping people with, sourcing money for projects and stuff like that. So I would love for you guys to just give a real quick example of a situation where you guys have had to work within a team, seeing as you guys are also creatives. So Stan, would you like to tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll share just for a minute. I've worked on a lot of projects. One of the most challenging projects is to create your own business. And so as a founder, you first look for what you care about, what you love, but then you find people that need help, and then you look to solve that problem. Well, what I learned very, very quickly is moving away from working in a structured environment and working in my own environment, I had to create that environment. And so there are a lot of things that I did not know. There are a lot of hard skills and some soft skills that I just didn't know about or just didn't have an expertise or a proficiency in. And so looking at Storicate and what I have today, it is a foundation that was built here at Full Sail, which I'm very proud of. But secondly, all of the creative design and energy and photography and videography are from grads of Full Sail. So you never know where your team is. Your team can be around you and you could be in front, they can be in front of you. And so what I would say as a founder who's experienced this is pay attention to those around you. You have people around you that are creative, that have different skills and strengths that you do. And so I think building a team of people that are like-minded is great, but also that diversity of talent and skills is really, really important. And I've been fortunate in being able to build my organization with creatives, and that's really helped me get where I am today.
And I love that you're still collaborating with your classmates and your colleagues at Full Sail, which is wonderful. How about you, Michael? Tell us about a specific time that you're working within a team.
It's funny. Comics is a collaborative medium, period. So it's very rare that we come across somebody either crowdfunding or looking for creator services that requires only one person because they can do everything. I mean, I can count the handfuls of people I know that can do, that can draw, color, edit, ink, and publish their own comic, including lettering and all that. Like, very few people. The most important thing I think to consider when collaborating with people is communication. Hamad touched on this earlier while we were behind the scenes before the show, and finding out how everybody communicates. I thought that was really important. Thank you, Hamad, for pointing that out, man. Because we all communicate differently, and everybody brings a different slice of creativity to a project. And in comics, when you're creating the comic, it's a visual medium meets narrative medium, and the words and the images, they go together like a wave, and it crashes subtly but also beautifully, and it washes ashore, and it's supposed to move the person, and that's how pages should move.
Awesome. Oh, I don't know if we can still hear Michael. I can't hear Michael.
Oh, sorry. I hit the
you're
mute
back.
button. I hit the mute button by accident. But to communicate with somebody in a visual medium, everybody has to be in synchronization 100% all the time. Even if one element is out of array or is disoriented, everybody needs to know what changed and why it's important, especially speaking to everybody's sensibilities, because as being a part of a team, everybody also has feelings, and all those feelings are important, not necessarily for the sake of, just being personable to one another and respectful, but also for the sake of the project at hand, because we create things in order to move people and inspire people. So the message that project brings is very important. Deciding on who does the communicating is very important, because that person should be able to speak to everybody's sensibilities.
Great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. Communication is definitely key. Hamad, I would love to hear, I mean, as a filmmaker, are you working on, I would assume you're not working on things all by yourself, right? What's it like to work within a team for those of us that don't know a whole lot about filmmaking, can you share with us like what it's like to work within a team environment on a film?
Of course, I worked as a graphic designer. Maybe a graphic designer might be more of a solo kind of artist, but at the same time, like filmmaking is the opposite. You'll have to work with a lot of different people, especially if you're like a director. When we talk about directors, you're gonna have a vision, you're gonna have an idea, and you need all the creative, crew members around you to put their knowledge, their creative input into it, so that you can have like this collaborative, creative creation at the end, I guess. So I think one of the best experiences I still work on movies till this day, and I have a few projects that are coming up, and I'm going to work with new team members that I've never worked with before. But I think one of those experiences that I won't forget was like being in Full Sail and doing my thesis project, Man and Quinn. What was interesting is that we got to work together as a team, and we were like, I was a foreign in the States, and all my classmates were from different countries, and we had to learn how to communicate. Like everyone had a different idea. Like even my vision, I had to communicate my vision to my classmates. And I come from the Middle East, and the story was very Middle Eastern. And I had to show them pictures, images, videos, music, sound, just to try to deliver what I had in mind. And each one of them had their input. Like we had classmates from the Asian countries. They had a different vision of how they're perceiving this information. So it was interesting and exciting at the same time, like looking at different perspectives and how everyone perceives an information as a story. And then at the same time, like we had to work as a team and figure out how we can all put in the effort and the ideas and the creativity that we wanted in this film. And at the end, like we were able to create, I think, a very successful film that went through a very fun festival run. It won a lot of awards throughout its journey. It got two like regional student Emmys for best film, best sound, best directing in another festival. So it was fun. I think
That's incredible.
We made something good.
I would agree that you made something good. I mean, wow, to know that your student project got so many awards. I mean, that's something you made at Full Sail and with a group of students. So I am super impressed with that. That's wonderful. So if I could ask you to give me your top 3 characteristics of what make a strong team. What do you say, Michael? What are the 3 characteristics a team needs to have in order for it to be strong?
Right off the top of my head, obviously communication.
Good.
But also vision and empathy. And I know that may not seem like a characteristic, but without the ability to see other people's work or other people's ideas and other people's expression, the idea of collaboration just kind of falls apart, right? Because you have to interpret, and that's also a part of communication, but you have to interpret other people's expression. And from someone who works with creators on a weekly basis, I'm constantly juggling interpretations on people's projects, including message and tone. And you have to make decisions based off that. And so I think those are 3 idealistic characteristics.
Those are really, really great characteristics. Yeah, good ones. How about you, Stan? What are 3 characteristics that come to mind for you?
So 3 characteristics. I would say trust is at the top of my list. We must trust each other if we're working in a team environment. I would say safety is another one. People must feel safe around each other, safe to express their feelings, safe to bring forth ideas. And then I would say transparency, probably transparency, people feeling like they can trust each other enough to be transparent and sharing and, being vulnerable. And so I think those are my 3.
Awesome. Very good. How about you, Hamad? What 3 come to your mind?
I do agree with my colleagues. I would add maybe feeling wanted, like adding that feeling to them, like they feel like they're wanted within this group.
That's great.
The idea of, I think, keeping it fun for me, like on a film set especially, like you want to make sure that even though we're trying to achieve whatever whatever movie, whatever scene, whatever you're trying to achieve, you still want to keep it fun. You want to keep it like a very happy space for everyone, that we don't have all those negativity. You're going to get to the second part where we're going to talk about the worst. But yeah, that would be the part, like we want to go the opposite of the negativity, I guess, on a film set. I think one of the tips one of the things I'd like usually to do, which is like bring different snacks and candies and stuff on set. I think it always helps like communication and helps everyone talk, which goes back to communication. I think communication is key.
Yeah, very much so. So after hearing your answers, I would like to work on a team with the 3 of you I think
Let's
you
form a team today.
we'll form a team today. So I really appreciate that. So next, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your leadership style. All of you guys are in position of leadership where you're working with different people. Many of you have led teams. How would you describe your leadership style? And Hamad, I know you just went, but what would you say your leadership style is?
I'm a very calm person. Like I'm not super loud. And I think a lot of people would think that a leader needs to be a very hyperactive, loud person. And I think it doesn't have to be that way. Like you can be a very calm, very quiet. You don't get that angry, that upset. You don't have to be that scary to have people like follow your lead. And I think it works fine with me. Like I like to listen to people. I think listening helps communications, like listening to everyone and what they want to do helps me to figure out how I can like communicate what I have in mind back to them. And I think that's my secret, I guess, like listening.
That is a really good trait. I think all of us could benefit from better listening. I think if there were more people that listened in the world instead of talked, I think we'd all be better off, right? Michael, how about you? How would you describe your leadership style?
Very stoic. I'm a very logistic person when it comes to even communication and understanding people's feelings, whether it be a discrepancy or a grievance. Being in retail for so many years, like Stan could probably attest to, I've seen a multitude of people's reactions to certain things, big and small, and it really does put you on the fast and loose style of coming up with solutions quickly, whether they were warranted or not, whether you go the extra mile or not. Um, Being tactile about the way you respond and trying to create an environment in which everybody can be vulnerable about how they feel, but also very mindful of how you approach the situation. Not to be oversensitive, but so that you have a grasp
You can.
on understanding all the different aspects and variables, and you have a minute to control your own emotions, because for every one reaction, there's another reaction that responds to that. Right? So, as physics would put it, so you can't react impulsively to someone else's emotions, regardless of how kinetically you feel um, inclined to respond in such a way. Especially if you're the leader of a team, people look up to you. They look for your guidance. They ask you questions for a reason. Not that you want to let them down in any type of way. It's sometimes there is no solution. Sometimes there are only solutions that groups can come up with instead of a leader itself. By definition, being tactile and having the type of vision in a team allows you to kind of throw the ball around and make people empowered of their own solutions by giving them questions to figure out. Um, so
Great.
that's kind of a better explanation of being a stoic type of leader, whether you're vulnerable in yourself to admit that we have now a problem and we need to create a solution. I do not have a solution, but I have a question to ask that might prompt one. Let's figure it out together.
That's great, Michael.
Mhm.
How about you, Stan?
So I'll share a quick principle of leadership that I've learned, and it took me a long time to learn this because I thought leadership for so long, Heather, was about gaining things. You gain more money, you gain more access, you move up the ladder. Even the things that we say about leadership is moving up the ladder. What I learned, and it took me a long time to learn this, is that leaders actually lose rights. You don't gain rights. What I mean by that is when you become a leader, you become in service of someone else's success. And while you can be successful as a leader, success is really defined by the people that you help improve their own lives. And for me, the principles of that statement really speak to how I try to shape my leadership. Certainly not perfect, but I try to be relational. I try to invest in the potential of others. Listening, again, Hamad said that, listening is so key, but being present and also providing people with meaningful feedback. So often in our careers and in our lives, we're providing criticism instead of meaningful feedback. And I think it's important as a leader that I execute on those, and that's helpful to me, and hopefully to the people that are being led by me or are being working alongside me.
I love that. The whole concept of servant leadership is something that I'm a huge fan of, and I do my best to live that way as well. So I think that's great advice. So Stan, I have a question specifically for you.
Oh boy.
Seeing as you have worked on startups from a leadership perspective, and you've also worked for AT&T, which is a huge like mega corporation. So from a leadership perspective, what is the difference between working in a startup environment versus a large corporation?
Yeah, so a couple of things. It's so interesting that you asked that. Creativity is encouraged and not stifled. And not that it was always stifled in telecom, it just wasn't true creativity. You're always in a box. And in a startup world, you can get creative and you're encouraged to fail. You're encouraged to try. The energy is different. And it's both, it's a very high stakes game working at a startup, but it has really, really high rewards. And so there's an intensity that comes with working at a startup and an energy and a passion that you develop. And I think that when I moved from large telecom to a startup, it was so easy for me to feel that energy, but also a bit of anxiety, to be honest, in working in a high stakes environment is something that you have to get used to.
Yeah,
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that it was a huge difference, and I know working in a startup environment too. I'm sure demonstrating your leadership ability is quite different, right?
Yeah.
When you're just kind of like having uncertainty every day, as opposed to also, working in an environment where someone else is, technically leading the organization. So I can imagine it's quite different.
Well, in a scenario where you're not sure what to say, sometimes you don't have certainty, but you have to show, not only strength and resiliency, but you also have to care and you have to be transparent with people around where the organization really is. And sometimes in the startup world, the organization is not doing well, and you have to be transparent with people and let them know what the risks are. Everyone has a family.
Yes.
And so on the other side of that, there's huge success, which is great, and everyone's celebrating. So it's a very emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, I can imagine. So Michael and Hamad, you guys have both talked about, working with creatives. So my question for you is, oftentimes creatives are known for being a little bit more emotional than business people. Like they take their ideas very personally, and they really want to. It's difficult for someone who's a creator to sometimes get criticism on what they're doing. Have you found that that's true? That maybe they are a little bit more emotional, or do you feel that that's just, a false take on it? And Hamad, you can go first if you'd like.
Okay, I mean, I do agree. I think we are emotional. And I mean, till this day, like when we have ideas, we're trying to pitch an idea, and someone shoots it down or tells you that, oh, I don't think this works or that, you could take that personally, and it does happen. I think the best way to go around is like just to train yourself to listen to criticism. You try to listen to, like going back to listening. Listen to what people are thinking, like why do they say that? Is it true? Maybe if 5 or 6 had the same comment on maybe a script you had or like a concept that you had, maybe there's something correct there. But then again, if it comes just from one person, maybe it's just an idea, like it's an opinion from that specific person. So to me, I think if the same comment comes back again and again, I would go back and revise it. But then if it came just once, it could be just an opinion, and I just skip it and keep moving.
Okay, great answer. Great answer.
great.
I think it is important for all of us to be receptive for feedback, right? How about you, Michael? Have you dealt with any situations where you felt like there was a little, like people are wearing emotions on their sleeves?
Yes. I used to be very much that person. Actually, I have a short story, and I
I
will share.
appreciate your
And I'll try.
honesty.
Well, Stan said something about transparency, and I think that's absolutely that's my number one communication rule is transparency. Because without the truth, we have no narrative direction. It's just a bunch of falsehoods layered on falsehoods, and to unravel that, I think is ridiculous because you could spend that energy putting actual truth into your narrative, whether it be your own experience or whether it be something you're creating, than having to create deception to the point. So when I finished in 2020, I had, lost my job because of COVID and stuff, the closures and all that. So I'd put all my energy into finding industry around me. The comic that I got to edit, that came up, and then I had spent a small fortune, which $99 to me was a small fortune, on a ISA, on a resource that's very viable to this day called ISA Connect, and it allows you access to niche careers, at like a job board, but
Cool.
from people in the industry like film. I
Mm.
found Smart Media LLC, and I applied to their internship program, and I was accepted. I interned for about 9 months. The minimum requirement was 20 hours worth of work. I did a variety of things, research. I got to read screenplays. I got to make notes. I got to make a difference on projects, by a director who's notable and published on Amazon and things like that. I thought it was a great opportunity for someone as rural as me in here in South Mississippi, which most people can call us flyover state, right? Not a whole lot happens out here, which is false, by the way. Morgan Freeman owns a coffee shop
Oh,
down
cool.
the.
I want to go visit his
So yeah,
coffee shop.
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. He's
Awesome.
filmed a few places around here. It's actually quite coming up.
Mhm.
Besides that, getting back to the point, I I was pretty much competing with another intern for a really viable spot, kind of like a PA spot, like top PA, right? And I thought because I had the master's degree and I had the experience and I had the life experience, which is something that not a whole lot of people have when they come out of school, right? Most people go into school and they have that life experience afterwards. I had it before, and I brought that to class and all that, and it kind of elevated everybody around me. But I received a phone call one morning. I was woke up by Nicholas, and he asked me if there was something going on. And quite frankly, I'm not troubled to admit this. I was juggling a bunch of things. This was the first time I had juggled internship. I was juggling a project. I was trying to write my own. I have kids, so there's a family dynamic at play there, which becomes quite stressful because you have to become a master scheduler and you have to schedule everything so everything synchronizes. And I just kind of opened up to him about it, and he suggested that instead of trying to master a whole bunch of different skill sets, that you focus on one and become a master of that and then move on. And I was quite frustrated because I wasn't getting the attention I felt I deserved. And when we had that conversation and we were done, we both agreed that maybe the internship program wasn't a right fit for me at this moment, which kind of crushed me because I felt like a failure, like right out of master's degree, and you failed the only thing you went to school for, right? Well, there was a very valuable lesson in that, and it was a multitude of things, but one of them was an ego check, right?
Mm.
You don't deserve anything. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody is required to give you anything for anybody. And I figured that out real fast. And he was right. Become a master of one thing. And so I took that to heart really seriously. So after that first comic, I ended up getting with Inked after I got some notoriety with my podcast. And I now have 2 pages worth of comic edited credits. And I'm a staff writer with Broke Comics. I'm writing something with serious, super serious comics. I've worked with a bunch of people in various parts of the world, um, over in Poland and Britain and Australia, and even in South America. I work with an artist right now creating multitude of characters that I plan on rolling out over the next decade.
That's exciting.
And it is exciting, and I learned how to overcome the detriment effects of self-defeat by humbling myself, by
Mhm.
mastering my skill set. And now that I'm still not a master, right? I've re-educated myself. I went to Comics Experience Online. I went into a mentorship program with Jim Higgins from DC. Um, Personally, I'm still learning things new every day, but I'm way more of a master at editing and comics than I was when I first started. And
That's
to
great.
close this story out, full circle moment, Nicholas reached out to me on social media one day, when I commented on his photo because we stayed in touch, and he offered me to come back and be like, I guess, a guest reviewer on a comic that he has coming out with Scout. And so in the end, it all really paid off.
Good. That's
I
great.
got to learn a valuable lesson. And that really kind of added to the sense of leadership that I now have, because I can now pass that and pay that forward to somebody else in the same situation.
Yeah. Well, one thing that stood out about what you said is that, and we teach this in business too. It's like you have to master one thing, right? Like you can't be everything to everyone. You have to be really good at one thing. And I think that it's great that you recognize that. And it also takes a lot of humility to be able to sometimes recognize, like, hey, nobody owes me anything. I'm in this space on my own. I need to figure this out. So, so that was a really, really great point. So, my next question for you guys is, what do you feel the most toxic traits are in poor leaders? All of us have worked with different people over the years. I can think of one person I've worked with in the past that I learned a lot from. I feel like I'm a much better leader because I learned what not to do. So, Stan, what do you think about this?
Wow, this is a good one. I think that the most toxic leaders that I've ever worked with and for always want to be the hero of their own stories. They fall in love with their own ideas, and they're looking for a yes. And here's what I mean. I've worked for leaders in the past where I've given feedback and I've said, I don't think that's a great idea. And instead of listening, they looked for someone else to reinforce that it was a good idea. And so I think toxic leaders do lack empathy. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of narratives. So I'm a storyteller, so I love to think of everything as a narrative. And, when I run into people that want to be the hero, I just allow them to be the hero because that's what they want to be, and you won't be able to talk them out of that. So, yeah, that's my feedback.
I have to agree with you 100% on that answer. Michael, how about you? What would you consider to be the most toxic traits of poor leaders?
In a world with 7 billion people in it, we all have a voice. So I'm sure if you're outside in the universe and you're listening in, this is a very loud sphere. Everybody's story wants to get published. Everybody's story wants to get heard. People express it in a different way, whether they put it in a soundless forum where it's just images and the motion is really strong, or if it's a comic book. Everybody thinks that their voices need to be heard, and the people that I find approach this with toxicity are the ones that try to force that message, and they do it for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I did this and I wrote that, and they're the ones that don't acknowledge the other people involved that help bring that to life. I know we see a lot of that in mainstream. And they use a lot of I statements, and they don't practice humility, and they don't bow down and nod to previous creators or the people that inspired them to do that. For people who lack passion, to not include the hard work and possibly the blood sweat of others. Like, I work with people in South America, and their political state isn't great right now. I know artists who, if they don't get a paycheck, their family doesn't eat for a week.
Sure. Sure.
It's to not acknowledge the people involved in your projects, and I'm sure this will go for Hamad too, because they're large collaborations. Everybody has a stake. To not acknowledge that is a horrible toxic trait, because everybody wants to be validated. We all want to feel important. Like Stan added earlier, we all want to feel valuable. I think Hamad touched on this too. We all want to feel valuable.
Got to give credit
And while
to your team.
and while nobody owes you anything, when you put in the work, you yourself can recertify that, I did this for me, and that's fine. But also acknowledge your peers, because you never know who you work with in 10 years from now. I mean, I could hit rock bottom tomorrow and Stan's going to be my boss, and I go in for an interview and I remember you. And he's a horrible person, and he might take that into account. And that's not his fault. That's my fault for not being the person that I should have been in the moment that I needed to be, instead of being, self-preservative or trying to make myself sound more than I am, and have less less compassion for myself by having less compassion for everybody around us. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand we all have to make it in the world, but we all have to make it together. Nobody can go it alone.
Yeah. So true. How about you, Hamad? What would you consider to be some of the
Um,
most toxic traits of poor leaders?
First of all, I do agree with both of you because I think that those are like the worst things that could happen. I would like to add like a one small trait, I guess, that I can add, uh, which is I've noticed it or felt it a lot, like in the especially like in the entertainment and the creative industry, is that when you have someone that puts in their own opinion instead of what the project's opinion is, like what,
Mm-hmm.
like, let me try to figure that out, how to say it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so let's say that you have a project, and the best way to go forward is this, but they put their personal opinions because they have personal beliefs that
Mm-hmm.
takes it to a totally different direction because they believe in that instead of going with what this project really needs. And it happens a lot in the arts in general. Like if it was a logo design, if it was a film, if it was usually like mostly in logos, that's what I noticed. Like
Mm-hmm.
designing and branding, that's where it comes from. They feel like, oh, this is what would represent the country because I like the color red. Instead of like, okay, your company talks about this, 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 and this. This is what you want to do. And they won't listen to that kind of thing. I'm not sure if I was able to deliver the idea, but that is one of the worst things I've noticed working in the arts, especially as a designer.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that as a visual artist as well. So, so yes, I appreciate you sharing that. So we still have a few minutes left to take some questions from our audience, and so I have one here that that was asked just a while ago while we were talking about some other things, and so this is for you guys, and whoever wants to volunteer or not volunteer to answer this, it's up to you guys. With remote work now being, you know, the business model in so many different sectors, what challenges do you feel creative leaders have had to overcome with this new method of working together as a team? So, do we have any volunteers on answering that question?
I have an answer to
Sure.
that. So one of the things that I think that's important in this environment, when you're remote, understand that you actually have control of how others experience you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, when you're showing up in person, there's a lot of variables, and when you're online, there's a lot of variables. Understand what those variables are: your sound, your equipment, how things are set up. Are you present? Are you multitasking? You have control of how others will experience you. And so take control of that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
far too often, and again, this is, I'm speaking from my own life, is that what we care about is how we're going to experience the meeting. When we shift our mentality around providing others with the experience of us, we can do things like get ahead at work, even in a remote environment, show up and be present and give ideas and make meaningful contributions at work while remote. Because I know for people out there that are exclusively remote, especially in the corporate space, they're struggling to find meaning around how can I grow in this environment? I'm in my room every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so just be encouraged and be thinking about how others are experiencing you.
That is such great advice. Yeah, with us all working remote and being in a virtual environment like this, people pay attention even to small things like the lighting that you have in your room, or
It's true.
like,
It's
you
true.
know. But it really makes a difference. Do either of you, Hamad and Michael, do you have any comments on remote work and working in teams?
I think in filmmaking, like mostly pre-production is happening right now remotely because it's much cheaper and easier, and like everyone can be at home and just like try to figure out how the pre-production phase and how are we going to plan for the production. So I've been to a few very successful, I think, online sessions where we planned the whole shoot online
Cool.
using all the equipments and all the like all those cameras, whatever we had, just to figure out how we're going to shoot the whole thing without being on set. So that was very helpful. I think it does happen, but at the end of the day, us as filmmakers, we're going to have to go to the location and film the whole thing.
That's yes.
Yeah.
Interesting now how we have so many more options to collaborate, right? How about
Yeah.
you, Michael? Any
So,
comments on that? We have more questions coming in, which is wonderful.
So So many things to say about remote work. I've experienced good and I've experienced bad. And there's still a lot to be desired as far as remote employers and employees can go, because there's still a lot of gray area to figure out as far as like different policies that would work in a corporate environment don't exactly apply to your home environment, like dress code. But I will say, from one person who serves other people remotely, is to take other people's time seriously,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're getting paid for it. Um, the amount of work that you do in an office versus the amount of work you do at home could vary if you allow your home energy to give you the desired feeling that you have all the time in the world, because you don't. Act as if tomorrow is the end and you don't have tomorrow, you have 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Employers really value how fast you can work at home versus an office, because you have to consider this. When you work at a place and it's 45 minutes away from your house, you have to prepare an hour ahead to make it there on time. You're completely bypassing that in a remote environment, and so things are expected of remote workers quite faster than normal, and
Mm-hmm.
so showing up on time. But you should
Mhm.
still take the same amount of time to prepare. So like you guys said, if you're working in an office environment and remotely, then the lighting and your background and the noise level in your environment should probably mirror the professional environment that they're looking to, wanting you to be in meetings involved with, at a capacity that would be kind of like the same in an office space. So you have to be respectful of people's time. Always
Mm-hmm.
prepare today for tomorrow. That is one of the most successful things, especially as a leader, that I could pass on to anybody wanting to work remotely, especially for someone who's trying to bring industry to where I'm at, where there's hardly very any. And like, I could drive an hour or two. So I'm 4.5 hours outside Atlanta. I'm an hour and a half outside New Orleans, and I'm 6 hours away from Jackson. There's lots of industry over in those
Mm-hmm.
parts, but not so much over here. So I have
Right.
to bring
Mhm.
industry. That means planning at least a day a week, cold calling emails, trying to get clients, and then communicating with the ones that I already have on the schedule, which is
Mm-hmm.
which is important. That's why I say communication is important. If you think that you need to talk to somebody, if you're involved in remote work, do not hesitate to reach out and make them feel your presence. Because if they feel like you're not there, they will check in on you, and that's not the perception you want people to have of you. Like, oh, I have to check on you every 45 minutes because you don't check in often.
Yeah.
It's still
Mhm.
very much the environment. You need to ask questions, be involved, stay active. If you can get somebody to think about you, then you always have the attention of that person in a way that benefits you and your career in the future.
Yeah. It all goes back to communication, like we talked about earlier, right?
Mhm.
So, our very last question of the day. What advice would you give a creative who is just beginning their career? And let's start with you, Michael. What advice would you give to a creative who's just getting started?
So, building upon the story that I told earlier about not multitasking and trying to serve a whole bunch of different avenues, right? Serve in your own lane. You have to figure out what that lane is. My original goal, going back to my 10-year plan that I created, and in one of the last few classes I had in the master's degree program, was to create a business plan on how your next 5 to 10 years would look. And I had to redo that after my conversation last year in Bethany's class, because it made me think about my next 10 years. Originally, I wanted to write film. So the plan was to finish school, move to LA, live with my aunt in San Francisco, and try to get a staff writing job, or at least a PA, or be a writer's assistant to somebody, anybody. So when COVID hit, I kind of had to pivot, and then comics found me because I loved comics, and then I just kind of went with that route. And ever since that kind of solidified like who I am, I fell in love with the medium, and so now comics is my medium. Like, I have opportunities now where I'm getting into film, but film is kind of like a multimedia facet thing now. So you can be in film and in comics. And in fact, in some cases, comics are the precipice to film writing, because they give you the material you need to pitch to a film. So
Mm-hmm.
the two play hand in hand. So basically, what I'm saying in simplistic form: know what you want to do, where you want to become a master of it.
Great advice.
I never give up.
Hamad, And don't give up. Yes, don't giving up is not allowed. How about you, Hamad? What advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out in a creative field?
I think in filmmaking, in the beginning, it might be a bit difficult jumping into a job or getting hired because you might want to market yourself towards one direction. What I did was the opposite of what I've been taught. Was I tried to market myself into several directions. So I had different resumes for different jobs at the same time. So I always applied for like a PA position, and at the same time I did a director position, and then like an art director position. And I did get jobs from different employers. So I got hired over here as a designer, like a graphic designer, and over here as an art director, and over here as a film director. And it worked well for me. So I did that at start, like at the beginning, until like I started figuring out, okay, I want to do more of the directing, but I still need to be paid sometimes from the other jobs. So I kept them all and worked a bit harder on what I wanted, kind of thing. And I think one other tip I would give, like especially for filmmakers, is that sometimes your audience might not be in the country you live in, or like the friends that you have around you. So sometimes you can create material that maybe your family won't like or your friends won't like, but that does not mean that people won't like it. So always try to figure out who would want whatever you're creating, kind of thing. So if you have a film, maybe your film does not work in the States, but if you pitch it somewhere else, maybe like in China or maybe Bahrain, they might love that a bit more than what you have when you do it in your country. So I think that was one of the things I even learned in Full Sail.
That's wonderful. Yeah, understanding different target audiences, right? And so I love that. I love that staying diverse and on your feet is a really great tip. How about you, Stan? You get to finish us up with this answer today. I hope it's prolific.
We'll see. I'll take a different spin on the creative approach. If you're creative and you're in business and you're looking to really flex that creative energy, what I think you should do to start is find a audience that has a problem that's really, really big. Find a group of people that has a problem that they can't figure out how to solve. If that solution aligns up with what you love to do, lean into that. So you found a group of people who have a problem, you love to solve that problem, lean into building a solution, and then from that, just become a master at it, and you will get paid to do it.
Oh, that is a great answer. Absolutely. It's all about problem solving. Well, I just want to thank our audience for joining us today. Thanks for the wonderful questions. And I really want to thank our panelists, Stan, Michael, Hamad. You guys gave some really great advice, and we really appreciate your time and for joining us from across the world and across the country. So we wish you the best, and take care. And thanks again for joining us for another episode.
Thanks. Nice to meet you all.